Hey, I'm super excited. ARB asked us to borrow their truck so we can test out the Old Man Emu MT64 shocks. Just coming out, not available yet. We're gonna drive this thing across hundreds of miles of all kinds of different terrain, rock, trails, you name it, and give our legit and honest and unpaid for feedback. Hey, we're going on a road trip and there are a couple of firsts. One, it's raining for the first time in a long time.
Let's go. We gotta hit the road.
We gotta go. All right, we're going to talk about the specifics of the MT64 and the characteristics. We've driven these over 1,000 miles now, every kinds of terrain. So we can give you our initial impressions of the shock. Before I do that, let's talk about the wide range of shocks and why you may spend more or less for a shock. With our Land Cruiser, we've gone the whole path, upgrading shocks gradually. So with the ARB shocks, you've got the Old Man Emu entry-level shocks. Those are really good heavy-duty shocks for a slightly modified vehicle that is not too heavy. And the key there is not too heavy, because once you get heavy, you start getting a heavier rate spring and you need more shock to control the recoil on the rebound. If those springs compress because you got a heavier spring because you're a heavier truck, once they unload, you need a powerful shock to keep it from bouncing you into the air. And I have stories about our Land Cruiser bouncing into the air. So we eventually graduated up to a heavier duty shock. Now, two reasons to upgrade. One, if you're going to be bombing through the desert in Baja constantly, making your suspension do this for hundreds of miles, that's going to heat up your shock. It's going to make your shock less effective, and it's going to wear them out faster. So if you're going to be doing stuff like that and you're a heavy rig, then you're going to start looking into the BP51s or something that's an adjustable shock and it's built for that kind of abuse. Now the MT64s are right in the mid-range. So if you're not an extreme, Baja bomber with your super heavy truck, then the MT64s are a really good application for a heavy truck that you need to control that spring and keep your tires on the ground. So they're a really good mid-range. Those higher end racing shocks are for doing just that, really, really bombing. If you're not doing that, you don't need to spend that kind of money. Let's talk about some first impressions about the MT64s for overlanding. You have to hit that sweet spot. Again, like I said, you can spend a lot of money or not enough money. And these are right in the mid-range, which are really good. If these were available when I was outfitting the Land Cruiser, I think it definitely would have been one of the steps that we settled at for a really long time. Different terrain. So on a dirt road, cruising down a forest road, It is not so stiff that it's an uncomfortable ride. It's very responsive. And when you do hit some washboard, it keeps your tires on the ground, and it just seems like a really stable shock. It has enough shock there so that if you've got a heavy spring, it's going to control that spring. This Tacoma has some pretty heavy springs on it because it's a heavy truck, and it controls the rebound, the up travel very well. On the freeway, how's it feel on the freeway? So on the freeway, it's stiff. So when you're driving a sports car and you feel that goo 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 goo, like when you go over a speed bump, or you go over a shock, or sorry, you go over a reflector and you feel that dunk dunk. That's kind of what it feels like. It's a nice firm shock. But I'll tell you what, this Tacoma, this suspension with the MT64s on it are a smoother ride than a stock Ford Ranger with tremor package. It's a smoother ride than that. So when I say they're firm, I don't mean uncomfortably so, but you definitely can feel the bumps. It's not a cushy, floaty ride. It's controlling that shock. Now, rock crawling, again, you can't adjust this shock. So in a rock crawling scenario where you might want a little bit more flex and ease of travel, it controls the spring, and so you are going off camber a bit. It's not sucking up that travel. When the tire goes up, the truck will start to come up and go off camber pretty quickly. But again, for an overlanding application, you're not necessarily doing a lot of that hardcore rock crawling. At least we don't. Sometimes we do that hardcore rock crawling, and it is usually unplanned.
I know, looks to be coming down the driver's side.
Today, we went through a couple of rock gardens, and the entire time, the vehicle was completely in control. I was not off camber too much, and I had the flex that I needed in order to traverse those rock gardens just fine. You guys out there that do more hardcore rock crawling, you're used to being able to disconnect your sway bars. That's a different application. But for an overland vehicle of fairly significant weight, these are a great shock. So again, just reviewing the trade-offs with the price point. You have your entry level, your mid-range, and your super extreme racing shocks, and you're gonna pay according to their capabilities. So if you have a fairly heavy overlanding rig and you go with the standard old man emu shocks and you're of significant weight, you got a heavy spring, that's not gonna be enough shock for you. You're gonna be bouncing when you go down the freeway, and you don't wanna do that. Take my word for it. Been there, done that. So the MT64s are a step above, right? So you have a heavier rig and you need a little bit more durability long term. It's a really, really good price point. And then if you're gonna be bombing down through Baja with a heavy truck for hours and hours a day, then you're gonna be forced into a higher shock price range. And the thing is, when you go from an MT64 to the BP51s, or another race type shock, you're gonna see that price point goes way up in the air. So this is a really, really good set of shocks for, I'd say, 90% of the folks that are gonna be out there overlanding. You're not gonna want for more shock than this. All right, you guys, again, thank you to ARB for letting us borrow your truck. Don't worry, that's gonna buff right out. This is a great set of shocks, MT64, really good for all around overlanding. Now, availability, latest Tacomas and 4Runners, but there's a wide range of vehicles that are going to be supporting We'll give more information in the description so you can see when it's going to be available for your truck. Thanks again for ARB, you guys. Until next time, outfit, explore, and we'll see you out here on the trail.